good?
Nope.
No.
Just a committee meeting. Yeah, we're good. Good afternoon and welcome to this August 19th meeting of the Finance and Capital Management Committee. Hope everyone is having a good day. Looks like we're very sparsely attended today, but we're still going to have a meeting for sure. First thing on the agenda is to look at the previous meeting summary from June 17th. I've had a chance to look at that summary. I find it thorough and accurate for what we discussed back in June. The next item then is our levy committee update. Dr. Thompson.
So what I would like to do, Mr. Perry, is push that to the end because by advice of counsel, we want to make sure that Dr. Chapman is off hours before she presents.
Okay.
So she is going to come in at 5 p.m. And as soon as she walks in, I'll wrap up and transition to that section of our update.
Got it. We don't want to make sure we don't violate any laws or anything.
That's
so do
right.
it after hours.
That's
fine.
right. We want to make sure we're. I think you'll be excited about the work that's being done. So
Okay.
I'm certainly happy with how hard they have been working. But the next item that I'll move to is the monthly finance report. And before I open this and we start to take a look at it, what's most important to note, well, a couple of things are important to note. One, this is 1 month of the first fiscal year. So there are so many variances that occur. For example, it's not like we receive the same tax amount each month. It doesn't. It comes in waves. So that can skew a 5-year forecast. The second thing that can skew a 5-year or skew the finance report is it compares 1 month to the previous to the last year's month or to the forecast itself is, of course, expenditures too, because they come also in waves. So it can be a little bit misleading, but what the numbers that you're seeing are pretty in line with what we anticipated moving into our first year. Even though it's 2024, we are in our second month of the fiscal year 2025. So I'll go ahead and we'll just take a look at this report. At any point, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So you've received this report. Obviously, it'll be on the board agenda next month for our next meeting for approval. We're 1 month look back, so this is the first month of fiscal year 2025. And we'll take a look at fiscal year 2025 revenue and expenditures through July, fiscal year 25 monthly revenue analysis, and then compare it to July, and then again the monthly expenditures, and again compared to the previous year. So what you're looking at primarily, we'll be looking at how did we compare July 23 to July 24, and then how does that compare to the 5-year forecast? Variances one way or another. Really important to keep in mind, which is a little bit confusing at times, is budget versus 5-year forecast. 5-year forecast is set in stone at 2 different points in the year. Budget flexes. We set the budget. Certain things we know in a budget and can easily 5-year forecast. For example, one of the easy ones to 5-year forecast, as long as you have your staffing level set, it's easy to gauge employee costs. That's pretty straightforward. It doesn't fluctuate during the school year. Obviously, contracts and negotiations, which we're embarking upon this year, impact the 5-year forecast and what it looks like one way or another. But from month to month, it really doesn't impact the 5-year forecast because, for example, we know what the pay raises are and we've calculated that. We've accounted for that. So what you're looking at right here is kind of the mile-high view of this current year to date. So after our first month, again, we're talking 8% of our year, and looking at those numbers, But overall, the revenue is up $3.5 million more than expected. And that is largely because of when tax receipts come in. That will definitely even itself out over the course of time. As does the second piece. You see the $5.1 million increase in expenditures compared, as it's compared to the 5-year forecast. That's largely impacted, if you recall, I mentioned at the last board meeting that we didn't process books, for example, or textbook purchase. We knew that. We budgeted for that. It was reflected in the budget. But when we did the 5-year forecast, that was expected to, that $2.6 million on textbooks was expected to be in fiscal year 24, not fiscal year 25. But the money was budgeted. But it's going to reflect this negative variance on a 1-month snapshot. Second piece that we have in here too, that we're still working towards. Remember, we have the COPS deal as well. So those payments started, and then we are also still in some degree of limbo. I know Dr. Robinson's working the issue, but we're in some deal of limbo over what we're doing with the city as it pertains to the LFI money or the 004 account and how that money is going to get distributed back. So some of it is earmarked for the project, the Kenmore project. Some of it is earmarked for the 5-year forecast. So we're still waiting to see how that shakes out and what that number is going to look like. So again, I can't read without glasses. Again, what you're seeing here, again, is overall the potential impact. If this were at the end of the year, we would have a $1.5 million negative variance. But that will not hold. Trust me, that will not hold, because we will not continue to see the revenue being that upside down in our favor. That won't continue. And we won't see the negative expenditures that are hurting us right now on this one single snapshot won't continue either. It's just how invoices and finances came in. What you do see down on the bottom, that blue, is you're looking at an operating deficit. We've been saying all along we would be in, and let me forward that up a little bit more. Looking now at this blue box, we know that we're moving into deficit spending. Hence the need for a levy. Again, this number will not end up being nearly this large, but that's what it's looking like just after 1 month. But we are definitely going to eat into our cash reserves because our expenses are going to exceed our revenue. Another variable in all the revenue issue, which is virtually impossible to predict at this point, and that is vouchers and the impact of vouchers, which we talked about at our last meeting. So far, what it appears in early numbers are that the students that are most engaged are taking advantage of that opportunity are kids that have primarily never attended Akron Public Schools ever. There are kids that have been in private schools all the way through, and now they have the opportunity to capture that money. And also the family incomes of those families tend to be on the higher side versus the lower side, as we can now go almost any salary or any family income and qualify for the voucher program now. So predicting exactly how that's going to impact us, it's hard to say. But what we are going to do is monitor it closely, take a hard look at our numbers as we start the school year. We have projected a declining student enrollment, and we continue to do that. We looked at those numbers over 5 years and then averaged that out, and that's where we stay, which is about 320 students per year is what we've lost over the last 5 years. Again, ebbs and flows. Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarity, if the majority of the students utilizing the vouchers have never attended a public schools, never been in our system, then how can they account for a decline if they were never within the budget?
Well,
Because I'm
that's
guessing they're at all stages, like kindergarten, first, second, third. So if they were never in the overall count, the assumption is that they would have been at this school, or they could have opened a road to Green, they could have opened a road to Coventry, or, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just, how would you anticipate that would impact the budget? It's different if they leave, for the kids who leave.
It's actually not on vouchers. So,
Okay.
for example, let's say you had a sixth grader that's at, I don't know, any private school, and you hear about the voucher program. You've been paying the tuition out of your family income the whole time. And let's assume you live in the school district of Akron City Schools. You apply for the voucher. You'll get the voucher, and that money will come out of the proceeds intended to go to Akron Public Schools. So it doesn't matter if you went here or not.
Thank you for the clarity. I understand now. Thank you for that.
So moving along here. Now what we're comparing is July to July, so it's a little different. The first part was July to forecast. This is July to July. So you can see how things changed from one year to the next. But again, I just really need to emphasize that you're going to, one year you might receive tax collections in July, and the next year you receive them in June. It always varies a little bit depending on what the county is able to do from their end, from a fiscal perspective. But as you look at this, actual revenue collections for July were $33,655,000, and then the prior year they were $33,757. So that ends up, when you're looking at a deficit number, that obviously helps us. State revenue, though, was actually up in state revenue, and then all other revenue, you can see there's a decreased number there as well. So in totality, revenue for this month, which is a good sign, is up $847,000 compared to last year. That doesn't keep pace with increased expenditures, however. And we'll cover what some of those reasons are. But fiscal year to date, general fund revenue collected $49 million through July, which is $847,000, or 1.7% higher than the amount collected last year. The largest difference in revenue comparing current year-to-date revenue collected through July to the same period last year is unrestricted grants and aids, and revenue coming in at $1,400,000 higher compared to the previous year. So those are a little bit, they're restricted in what we can do with them. And that was followed by revenue in lieu of taxes coming in at $642,000 lower. Part of that student population decline. So possible cash flow variance from forecast. So now we're back to the forecast, not July to July, but to the forecast, which was last updated in May. And so what you see there again is a favorable comparison. We have more revenue coming in, and you can see to the right in that top box where that revenue is coming from primarily, and it's spread over a couple of different, over those first two categories, which is local taxes and state revenue. And so results through July indicate a favorable variance of $3.5 million compared to the forecast total annual revenue. And this means the forecast cash balance could improve if we were to stay along those lines. But we are projecting that we'll move into deficit spending. But through the first month of the fiscal year, we are not, is what this is telling us. So fiscal year 25 monthly expenditure. So now we're just looking at month to month. And you can see salary and benefits. No surprise that number went up because the raises kick in. So that is not surprising at all. Purchase services went up considerably, and that's largely, again, because of our textbook purchase, which we pushed from one fiscal year to the next, so we knew that was coming. And then all other expenditures went up quite a bit as well, and that's basically almost everything else falls into that category. One of those things that falls into that category, for example, is our COPS payment.
How much is the COPS payment of that amount, Steve?
The COPS payment's about $1.4 million a year.
Okay.
And then, as you can see, compared to the same period, total expenditures are up roughly $6.2 million. Again, that's inflated. You don't take it as an indication of spending out of control. That's not it at all. You know, a little over $4 million of that is in two singular areas that would be out of the control of the administration. Well, not out of the control. One was the textbooks being pushed over, which we knew, and the second one is just paying for the COPS. We are, of course, and we'll cover it in just a little bit, we are earning revenue in terms of proceeds from investments on that money, but of course, it almost offsets what we're earning in interest is offsetting what we're making in payments. But that's in a totally different account. So possible, looking at expenditures, possible cash flow variance from forecast. So we're back to looking at the forecast, and you can see that we're, again, what it looks like at first blush is that we're overspending. Again, 2.6 million of that is textbooks, 1.5 million of that is COPS, and you subtract that from that $5.1 million, and you're, you know, within not even 1% of being much of a variance. The fiscal year is approximately just 8% complete, as I mentioned before. Monthly cash flows comprised of one actual month plus 11 estimated months indicates totaling $370 million, which is $5.1 million more than the total expenditures projected in the district's current 5-year forecast. So, you know, that is a variance over 12 months, not just one. That's not saying that that's 1 month. That's over a 12-month time period, and we know what caused that. So overall, you know, to report after 1 month of data, it looks solid. We're still okay. I'm not reporting yet that we're in deficit spending. I do predict that this, before we're done here, we will see that. But the longer we can hold that off, the better. Part of it also is letting filter out the cuts that we made and seeing how that's actually going to hit the 5-year forecast. We have a projection in here, so we just, once the dust settles and we get everybody back in school and know how many students we have, we'll know if we're overstaffed anywhere. We'll make adjustments. There could be too many teachers in one building and not enough in another. All those adjustments superintendent's office will make as we move forward. And, you know, our job in the Treasurer's Department is to make sure he knows and make sure he knows what the staffing levels actually look like and what our student counts look like. And then that'll help them make decisions. And then in terms of our investments, those have been they're still hot. They're still doing well. I don't know how closely you've been watching the market, but inflation is way down compared to what it was at its height, which was about 7%. We're at about 2.5% now, which is a fairly normal inflationary rate. But we're still seeing good returns on investments at this point, not as high as they were 6 months ago. But the Fed's are indicating that the interest rates are going to drop again, maybe a quarter to another 0.5%. Good news for home buyers, not as good for investments, obviously, but so far the economy, as it relates to investing, is still doing well, and we're, I guess, taking advantage of that to the extent that we possibly can.
Excuse me. Did you say the Fed is dropping? Did you give a I think
Yeah,
I missed that.
they're indicating, the feds are indicating that interest rates are going to drop again, like in September. So if you're a home buyer, you might want to pump the brakes just a bit, wait till September hits and see what those rates come out at. You know, maybe if you bought a house at, you know, at its height, 7.5%, 8%, you know, at some point you might look to refinance, but I am not a licensed, you know, whatever that person is who tells you what to do with your money. But you can see here too, if you want to go through, you can go through line by line and also look at our investments as well. Our staff really does monitor this very closely. Valerie does a really good, she's our controller. She is on this, and Red Tree keeps us, they're our advisors, and they keep us well informed on what's happening with our investments, and we move stuff around based on their recommendations often. And then Val keeps as much money invested as we can without jeopardizing being able to pay our own bills, you know, because we have too much money invested. Because it takes a little time to move it out of there. And we use Star Bank too, which is for public schools, government agencies, and they give us good rates as well. So we'll put money in that spot as well. One of the things I just wanted to quickly bring up before I turn it over to Dr. Chapman, as I use the last 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. So
5 o'clock on the dot, right? Yep.
Let's see if I can get out of this. Okay, now how do I get out of this? Now that I'm here, how do I go back to my PowerPoint? Perfect, thank you so much. So I'm gonna take a look at the board member, well actually, one of the things that we need to take a look at that's required statutorily is we receive student wellness and success funds. And so we have to use those appropriately. That's been posted on our website, how we're using those success funds. It is in line with all the state requirements. That plan is posted. It's also attached on here if you want to read it. It's not long. A couple of paragraphs explains where that money goes and how we utilize those funds, and then we are required to inform the board. So this is a statutory requirement that Dr. Robinson and I have to make, and so we want to make sure we hit that here, and we'll probably mention it to the full board at our next meeting. Just I know it's a bit redundant, but it's probably just the best to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. We're in the midst of, and I know that, again, Dr. Robinson's office is working on this issue as well, trying to make sure that we have a calendar of events that really keeps you posted and knowing not just events to go to or things to do, but or participate in or be a part of, but also working towards information of things so that are cyclical, that come to the boards for board approval, so you know that it's coming months and months in advance. So again, I know that's an effort of the administration to make sure that you're as well informed, and we're trying to get this information to you as soon as we can. So we're working to build basically a comprehensive calendar that will cover all that you would need to know.
Yeah. And I like that it's divided into 3 different categories too. You know, community events, state, national events, and APS events.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
So backpack at the zoo's coming up this week.
That's right.
Tuesday and Wednesday, right? Yep. What time is that?
I tried to watch you.
Yeah, 4 to 7.
How did you do that? Where did you go? On the
thought it was 4 to 6 or 4 to 7.
I'm dumb. Okay, thank you so much.
On my calendar, it's held from 4 to 8.
4 to 8, okay.
It goes that long.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to the levy update. Dr. Carla Chapman's going to get
3
well,
minutes.
Not yet, right?
3 minutes, yep.
Are there any questions about
filibuster for 3
anything that
minutes.
we've covered, either understanding of where we are financially, understanding of anything that we've covered that you feel like you could want to ask questions for?
So I just want to make a comment on the Student Wellness and Success Funds Plan. I was looking on the website. I like that it gives an indication of how we're looking to improve, physical health as well as mental health, because we know that mental health is very important, and it talks about our child study office and what we're doing with psychologists to make sure that our children are mentally, healthy. So I appreciate that, and people can go online and see that at the Akron Schools website, akronschools.com, and you can look it up and you can read the entire plan there. It's a couple paragraphs long, not very long, so read it. Very informative.
Yeah, and I think I can speak for Dr. Robinson, although he's sitting right here. So I think all educators are well aware that the dynamic that kids experience today is so much different than the dynamic that I experienced as a kid in terms of social media and all the other ways to communicate and move information, which isn't always nice. I think really puts a lot of pressure on kids today that I didn't experience. So we know that mental health is a huge issue, and that's part of the reason that Dr. Robinson and the 5-year are in the strategic plan is addressing that issue as well.
Yeah.
We have to pay attention to the mental health, not only of our students, but our staff, ourselves, our board, all of those, because if we're not healthy, it's hard to help other people be healthy as well.
And it's good that we're keeping it at the forefront of our thoughts. So just having it there and knowing that we're focused on that specifically is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that the state's giving us some funds to do it, because a lot of times we get unfunded mandates and we receive no money to execute what state legislators want us to execute. And at least at this point, we're receiving funds to help support that initiative. So I think we're all fortunate to hear that. So anyway, I'm going to introduce Dr. Carla Chapman. I think you all know Dr. Chapman. What you may not know, though, is that on her off hours, she has been working, I'm dead serious, incredibly hard at putting this levy together and the committee together. She's put in an extraordinary amount of time. She knows it really well, and I feel like, we have a really strong chance at getting the word out and having the ability to pass this thing. Because it doesn't happen on its own. You just float a levy out there, you get killed. You have to message it, and you have to tell the story. And so she's led a group of people that have done a great job of that. So without further delay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I appreciate the name there on the slide, but I am here today as Carla Citizen, who lives in the 44307 zip code. And I have family that has attended this school throughout their K-12 years. I have family who currently attend the Akron Public Schools, and so for that reason, this is a very, very important issue for me. I don't have to tell this committee about the need because all of you understand the need. This is the Finance Committee. You understand what we're facing in our budget. I think what is most important for me when I talk to groups is to share with people that it's been 12 years since we've asked. And I was here 12 years ago supporting a campaign at that time. And knowing that districts typically ask every 4.5 years, and about 5 years ago, we were ready to make the ask. And then, of course, what happened? The pandemic. And so we were able to stay away from that at that time because there were lots of other funding resources that came our way. But like every other household and every other business in our community and our country, expenses have gone up. And so now this is where we are, and you all know this better than anyone. What I want to tell you by way of an update is that we do have a very strong citizen committee of individuals who have signed on and up to be a part of our efforts. That includes Summa Health, that includes Children's Hospital, that includes other private citizens and consulting groups, that includes state and federal communications, that includes Child Guidance and Family Solutions, faith-based leaders, retired APS staff, and other business executives. We have a 24-member strong citizen committee who is ready to lead this work. We have 3 active committee groups, subcommittees in outreach, fundraising, and social media, and they are actively working even as we speak. We do not have an issue number yet. If anybody has any way to make that happen faster, I'd be most excited about that. We do expect an issue number soon, at which time you will start to see much more visibility in our community with that. Signage, mailings, pieces of literature that will go out to homes in our Akron community. We have been talking at ward meetings and community meetings for about 2 months now. We will be at the Akron Zoo coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday of next, what day? Tomorrow.
Yep.
Tomorrow and Wednesday of this week, having conversations with our community about the importance of passing this levy. And Carla Citizen will be there to have those conversations. And I think what is most important for us to keep at the front of our minds is that all the good work that has been started over the past 12 years, we want to continue. And all of you know what that is. You know about the awards given to our college and career academies for launching a pre-K-12 initiative. And even with the work that is necessary to engage equitably across our district for all our students, it is still good work. All-day kindergarten is good work. Expanding our early learning programs is good work. The increase in our graduation rates is good work. Double-digit gains in some of our academics is good work. And I'm just going to tell you what I learned by speaking with a union group last week. And one of the members raised her hand and said, you know, I met a family from Indiana who lived in an area that was taken over by the state. The school district, the school system fell into fiscal emergency and the state stepped in. And she said that this father told her everything went. Meal programs, athletics, after school weekend programs, all the things that matter as we support our young people went away. And that's what we don't want here in our district. You all know the numbers. You know that the deficits that we're going to face if we are not successful with this levy. And that is why I was voluntold, but that is why I decided to step into this space and do this work. It is important. I am in it to win it. And if there's anybody that will tell you any different, you tell them that Carla from a 44307 says she is in it to win it, because it is important for our young people, and I cannot see letting all the good work go by the wayside. It is just too important to our future. I've talked to groups and I hear a lot about workforce development, economic development, ensuring that we have a qualified workforce, that our young people feel jobs, that we mitigate crime and violence in our community. You want to do those things? Educate our young people. Keep our school system strong, because we need that in order that our future is brighter. We have a responsibility to ensure that our young people have the best. And I would wish that property taxes were not the only way to fund our district locally, but that's what we have. And so that 7.6 mil operating levy is going to cost homeowners of a $100,000 home value $22 per month. And that will yield about $30 million a year, approximately. The additional 1.3 mil to build a new North High School is $3.83 per month. And so that $25.83 combined is about 3 baskets of fries. And I think that that is an awesome investment for our young people. If we had another way, we'd use it. But this is the way for all of us to be engaged in the work of educating our young people, is by voting in support of this levy. And so we need everyone's help in the room to do that. Our consultant is Triumph Communications out of Columbus, and our treasurer is Barbara Sykes. And so we are about the work of moving in the direction to support a positive outcome on November 5th. I believe it's 78 days, if I'm not mistaken. Not that I'm counting. Yeah. Are there any questions for me? Dr. Molnar?
Thank you, Citizen Chapman.
Citizen Chapman.
I appreciate everything you said, and I love highlighting all of the wonderful things in our district that we would love to continue. However, as you mentioned, we do know the cost, we do know the deficit, we do know the numbers now. Do we have an idea of what we might lose or when we might lose it if the levy does not pass?
And that's a conversation for our treasurer. By law, we can talk about what happens if we don't pass it. What are we going to lose? What programs will be cut? And I imagine that that's going to be a coming back to the table with the superintendent and his team, and looking at what is absolutely necessary and what we need to do to maintain our district in a fashion that allows us to provide high-quality services for our students. The one thing we've always done is to ensure that the cuts were not as close to the classroom as they can be. If we go into a minus $25 million deficit, which is projected over the next few years, I don't know how to keep it from the classroom. I don't know.
You know, again, just sticking strictly with facts, if you look at it, if you look at the facts, you understand just how difficult this is. About 82% of our budget is people. That's salary, health care, et cetera, retirement, et cetera, et cetera. Leaving about 19% out there, that's paying for fuel, buses, electricity, all of those things. There's not a lot of discretionary dollars. So we've already made cuts, which I think is really important and was the right decision on our part to be ahead of this. And we've made $24 million in reductions. And it comes primarily from staff, because to make any significant cuts, staff has to be a part of that discussion. Then you get caught up into things like athletics and middle school sports. You get caught up in things like opportunities that we really want to give our students, like field trips and experiences, get cut. And the list goes on, and that'll be more defined as we move forward if we need to do that. Difficult to make those cuts in the middle of a school year because you've already built class schedules and master calendars based on staffing that you currently have. But that would be the discussion that we would move into administratively. And there's been some preliminary discussions, but again, you know, that 81% of our budget is people. And to make any significant impact in terms of cuts, almost always includes people. Unfortunately, that's programming. You know, we invested a lot of money in safety and security last year, and we bore the fruits of that last year. Fights were down. All of those things our schools were better and more conducive to learning. And we need, but it costs money to do that. You know, at least my own personal opinion is that would be tough to take that away. But those would be all things on the table to consider. And again, why is it happening? Are we blowing money? Are we wasting it? Are we not being efficient with our money? Remember House Bill 920, remember that. House Bill 920 freezes revenue in perpetuity forever. This levy, it passes at 7.6 for general operating, 1.3 for the construction of North High School. 10 years from now, it won't be collecting 7.6 mils for general operating. County auditor will keep ratcheting it down so it never collects more than what 7.6 mils collects today, or the day of passage. So it makes it virtually impossible not to come back and ask for an increase in revenue. It makes it can't be done, and we've done it for 12 years. So hats off to the administration that did that. That's to be congratulated. Average in Ohio is 4.5 years. School districts are on the ballot for new money. So we've exceeded that by 3 times, nearly. Anything else we can answer?
Good.
And just to close out from Citizen Carla, one of the reasons why it's so important for me that we pass this is because taking away services, academic interventions, lower class sizes, principal dean support, after-school programs, athletics, has never worked in favor of poor Black and brown children, especially, or any child in our district. When we start to take it away, our students lose, our families lose, and it's harder to bring it back without having to recover what was lost. So it's just never worked for young people who need it the most to take things away. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so very passionate about it. It doesn't work for our children to take things away and then start to try and bring them back and make things normal again. Once we start to peel things away, it becomes difficult to get it back to what it was. I would prefer to keep moving in the right direction and to get on the right road in moving in the right direction. So that's why this is important to me. Citizen Carla. All right.
Thank you, Citizen Carla, for that levy update.
So we're done. We're through our agenda unless there are any questions that I could answer.
Any other questions? Do you have a comment? Yes. Okay, come on up. Sure, we have time.
Thank you for your time, board members, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Treasurer, and Citizen Carla. The levy presentation, I do have a couple of questions. I don't expect to get the questions answered today, but with the levy, say you do need another levy. We need another levy in 5 years. What happens to this levy? Is it, if you go up, does another levy take this away? Does it replace it, or is it stacked on top of it? That's just a question that I would have. But I want to just talk about staff reduction. I want to talk about contracts. And I think contract is the next meeting, which I came for. But when we're talking about making cuts, when we're talking about making staff cuts, we continue to come here and we continue to talk about contracts, which doesn't seem like we want to talk about, but we need to talk about contracts. And we will be at the full board meeting next week to talk about contracts as well. But money has not been spent well. It has not been spent well. There is absolutely no circumstance in ORC or federal regulations where you can have a $3 million payout to 2 vendors and it not be a bid contract. There's no circumstance where that happens. Now, you can do $50,000 and under for whatever circumstance that you would deem. But we are spending money on vendors and it's not accounted for. And no one wants to say anything about Deborah Folk. No one wants to mention the name. And I'm not sure why that is, but so much money is being spent out of this district. And to say that we are fiscally responsible is not true. To say that we have a clean audit, yes, we have a clean audit. We're auditing, making sure that the beans are in the proper place, but that audit does not say that the money is being spent wisely. And that's what we're asking for from citizens. Black, brown, and poor kids are hurt. They will be hurt if we start taking the stuff away. But guess who's hurt right now? Black, brown, and poor kids. Why are we suspending kids in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade? How do we even justify asking people for money? And we have not addressed that. We've been down here for 6 months addressing transportation. And we're not talking about suspending black and brown poor kids. We're not talking about black, brown, and poor kids are suspended at 6 to 1. We're not going to talk about that. And so until the board is ready to talk about that, please don't use scare tactics for us with this levy, because our kids are being hurt right now. And what scenario can you expel a kindergarten? And then when we spend money in middle school because they are not coming to school or because they don't have fundamentals in reading, so let's give the teachers what they need. So let's make that part of the levy conversation. Let's do that. Let's make that part of the levy conversation. How are we going to educate kids? Please tell me the positives and not the negatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Harrison. Any other comments, questions, Carla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your comments. Just for a point of clarity, Superintendent or Chief of Staff, I think you helped me with that. am I to understand that we're no longer operating under law? I know like within the last few years that kindergartens up to third grade are not able to be suspended, excuse me, for like how they were, because I remember we had the presentation. So Mr. Harris, if you could, because I'm curious, is it something new that, some information you received? I'm curious as a board member because as I understood, it's supposed to be like, it has to be severe, like severity, because we
Extreme
saw the
violence.
numbers were egregious of the young people that were getting put out of school.
I guess my point would be that came up in a board meeting and we never talked about it. It was never brought back to us that it was clarified.
Oh, maybe I probably was, maybe I missed when it was addressed, if it was recent. Okay, I just wanted clarity because I need to know if something happened or did we get some new numbers or something that came out. So it was only for a point of clarity, Superintendent.
Thank you. So the issue that we have here is around suspensions. That is something that we're working on. That's something that was obviously occurring prior to my arrival. And so we are looking at that. We have a new handbook that we're working on that's going to be presented during the fall semester. But there were also things that were negotiated in prior contracts. And so we're kind of in the crossfire right now between what was negotiated and what the actual state law says. And so we're trying to make sure that we're following state law, which would supersede anything that is in a contract. But there are nuances to that and how we go about handling that. So that's something that internally we will be then working with negotiated agreements to ensure that we can get that process on the right path. But yes, that is something that we have had to address this past year when I got here. But there is a state law, which certainly is something that I want to make sure we're following. That's why we're really pushing to make sure that we strengthen the work that we're trying to do around multi-tier systems of supports, MTSS, which addresses academics, it addresses attendance, it addresses discipline. It also addresses PBIS, which is something that the year before, not all of our schools had successfully implemented. Last year, we did ensure that that was implemented with all of our schools. So that is definitely an area that I have been working on, although that cannot be seen necessarily publicly, but we are working behind the scenes on just that same issue around suspensions and expulsions, period. But especially when you're talking about suspensions of scholars that are K1, 2, and 3, pre-K, yes, we are definitely addressing that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for that comment. Thank you, Pastor Harris, again, for bringing that to the forefront. As recent, because I recall, like, well before you, Superintendent, we had a presentation. We seen the numbers of kindergartners and things that were expelled and put out of school. We're made aware of the law that prohibited pre-K through third grade to be suspended or expelled for school for minor offenses. But that's the interesting thing, and because this was a finance meeting, I'll just table my comments and make some notes and see at the proper time when this needs to be discussed, because I'm saying across the gambit. The law says pre-K through third grade. I see some high schoolers. I'm like, how they expel for that? But that's a different conversation. So I'm glad for it to be brought up. But it is concerning. But I want to stay on point for it. I know we're moving to legal and contracts here in the next 4 minutes. So I want to be respectful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to address your point, that is something that this year we are putting some measures in place with schools, even though we haven't got into the new handbook just yet, but we are putting those measures in place this school year to address exactly what you're mentioning in terms of what is happening even at the high school and middle school, secondary level. So we are working on that. We did not, unfortunately, get here overnight, and we're not going to move. This is not going to change overnight. But I do want to ensure that we are working within the confinements of the law.
Yeah. Dr. Mono, you had a comment or question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone, for this conversation. So my question is with this new student discipline information, K-12, but elementary especially, will this be brought to a committee meeting this fall then, or?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. And we also have committees working right now on finalizing what has to be done. But yes, it is going to be brought through committee and to the board.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, something else?
I would say, do we know which committee is going to go through instructional policy or equity or?
Probably the legal policy committee, because the handbook becomes policy once it is complete.
Voted on.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Jackson?
Yes. So for something like this, and I remember the discussions, it was like a citizen oversight committee with dealing with discipline at the time when this was being discussed. I'm just throwing that out there because this stuff is swirling around. It was about an oversight committee in some capacity, but I'll just sit that there and come back.
I've never heard of it.
Because it was dealing with the discipline, because the larger numbers, when I first became a board member, I heard talks about it. Mr. Harris had came and he addressed this. That was one of the first things. That's really what I know him from, is getting up here and talking about discipline, the disparities in discipline, and things like that. So it's a lot to unpack. But the reason why I believe the relevance about some type of citizen oversight committee dealing with discipline, I know some contractual things that's in there as well, but because language that can be used, because how the law reads for the pre-K through third grade, it's like for any minor offenses. But if I say it away, then something that's minor could appear major, if you understand. And so when you have accountability measures where you can't just deal with anyone any kind of way because you don't think someone's coming to speak up for them. And that's why I try to press to the community, you should come. If it's your grandchild, if it's your cousin, if it's your godbaby, if it's your church member, you should come and ask questions, before the board publicly, because agitation, I think, breeds change in a lot of instances. But so I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm glad it was brought up, though.
Yep, thank you very much. Any other questions for Dr. Thompson?
I can just answer one quickly for Pastor Harrison. It is a continuing operating levy, which a continuing operating levy means it never goes off the books. And the rationale for that is, are our expenses going to decrease over the next 5 or 10 years? They're most likely not. So to answer that question, and then straightforward, of course, I think we all know that K-3 is non-suspension of K-3 students unless there are some mitigating circumstances, mostly around very egregious physical harm elements, is what and that's been in place for a couple of years now. So that's not really new. So, okay. And I'll let they'll tackle it from there. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present at the committee meetings. I think they most definitely should help us move through our board meeting a little more briskly. And if you have any questions, or other community members, anyone has questions about our finances, we are an open book. We will open them up. Please come into my office, Dr. Robinson's office, and we'll have those conversations.
At 5:31 on the end on this, because you said open book, come to your office to look at finances.
Yep.
You know, this man just asked a litany of questions about finances.
And
so
I
you
would
just
love
invite
to
him
sit
your
down
office?
with Pastor Harrison.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Pastor
Yeah.
Harrison, I
Make
would
the
like to know how that
appointment.
go.
Yeah, make the appointment. So we don't want to be respectful of the next meeting, which is the legal contracts and board policy, set to start here in -1 minute. We're going to gather you guys where our next meeting is September 16th at 4:30, and we are adjourned. on the ground there too. That's yours. That's a nice one. I like that.